It's easy to travel around it with just public transport and a bike around the city, and 2 years without a car, and I still don't need it.
What does it mean to be a successful public transit agency? What are you doing to lead the way? It's time to learn from the top transit professionals from around the world. This is Transit Unplugged with your host, Paul Comfort.
Welcome to Transit Unplugged. I'm your host, Paul Comfort. Great to be with you on another edition of the world's leading transit executive podcast, Transit Unplugged. Today, we travel around the world to the land down under to Melbourne, Australia. Melbourne, as you know, has been rated for 7 years the most livable city in the world. I was able to visit there a couple of years ago and visit numerous transit systems and actually interview 7 of their top transit leaders, including Nicholas Gint, who worked with Yarra Trams, which is the world's largest light rail network in Melbourne. And today I'm excited to interview his successor, Mr. Julien Dehornoy, who is CEO of Yarra Trams in Australia, in Melbourne, where they have great coffee. Every day I was there, I went to a different place to get different types of coffee. You know, he spent many years in France. He was chief of staff to the Minister of Transport for France, and he had a major accomplishment there in Paris by working on numerous significant rescheduling to decrease the late trains by 25% in Paris, where he was working. I mean, that's a 25% improvement in on-time performance. And he's doing that same kind of thing in Melbourne, where they have 250 kilometers or 160 miles of double-track tram with 500 trams, 25 routes, almost 1,800 tram stops. As I mentioned, it's the largest operational urban tram network in the world. And prior to COVID, it was responsible for over 200 million passenger trips a year. And they've continually operated these trams since 1884. But as a result of that, Julien tells us about some of the challenges of working in a legacy system and how they're working to integrate transportation across Melbourne. I think you'll really enjoy this amazing, fascinating interview with Julien Dehornoy, CEO of the world's largest light rail tram network. Welcome to Transit Unplugged. I'm your host, Paul Comfort. We're excited today to travel across the pond again over to Australia, the whole other side of the world here from the U.S. with my new friend, Julien Dehornoy, who is CEO of Yarra Tram. Some of you all may remember several years ago when I did a tour of Australia, I was able to visit them and see their operations center, ride the trams. It is the largest tram network in the world, and we're so excited to have the CEO with us, Julien. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Paul, for having me today.
Yeah, very excited to talk to you about all the so many amazing things happening. You know, just as a side note, BRT and light rail lines are really taking off as kind of the rail lines that are trending right now, I think, across the world. Would you agree with me?
Absolutely, and there's big trend at the moment. One of the reasons may be that it's not only improving, the passenger, the way people move around the city. It's improving the city themselves. It's city shaping projects, and that's what is great about light rail. So you're in Melbourne, which has been voted 7 years in a row the most livable city in the world. And I love that place. We were just talking in the green room before we came on that when I visited, I was getting coffee like every meal at a different place. I mean, tell us a little about the context in which you're operating, then we'll dive in. So tell us about Melbourne, Australia, what's happening right now. You know, this show will be airing shortly. And so kind of let us know where you're at right now, what's happening. Well, Melbourne is and has been for many years one of the greatest cities in the world. As you said, one of the most livable cities in the world. There's a great mix of things here. It's a beautiful city, very near to the ocean, very green city, and I must say, arguably one of the best transit systems in the world. Yes. Which makes it a fantastic, place to live. And I've been in Melbourne for the last 2 years, and I must say, for the first day I wanted to buy a car, and 2 days after I still haven't bought a car because it's easy to travel around it with just public transport and a bike around the city, and 2 years without a car, and I still don't need it. That's awesome. Now, you came from another iconic city, Paris. Tell us about what you did there. Oh, sure. That's one thing Paris and Melbourne have in common is, great transit. And so my background is in rail. Actually, it took me a bit of time, probably 5 years, but in the beginning of my life. But ever since I've been 5, I knew I wanted to work with public transport,
Really?
And
I'm one of the only guys I've ever met who said that.
and so and there was not a second in the last 35 years or so that I regretted that. So I've been lucky to have had position in public transport all these times, both on government side and operators side. But yes, I've been fortunate enough to work with SNCF, so the French railways, for many years. And including lastly, I was running some of the commuter lines in Paris, the RER network, and I've been working there for on the RER for 4 years, running the D line, which is the longest and one of the busiest on the Paris network. And it was a great experience. Pretty complex. This was a legacy system, so with running with its own issues and a very solid, consistent growth of passengers. So we were having issues like related to that growth and the speed of the growth there.
So tell us a little bit about your career, because you've had an interesting career. Kind of start us off where you started, because as I mentioned, a lot of folks that listen to this show are drivers of buses and train systems, mechanics, everybody. And I think they like to see different stories of upward mobility and how you kind of worked your way up to be chief of staff of the Minister of Transport for all of France. And now you run Melbourne's transit system, one of the best cities in the world. I mean, dude, you got it going on. So tell us how you made it happen.
Well, as I said, it's all about started with the passion for public transport. Public transport is great. It's great. It's great technical systems, technology, but also it's all about changing people's life. And that's what is great about it. It's much more than just running services. It's so central. And you see, in cities like Paris, London, closer to you in the US, I mean, the transport really shaped the cities and the countries. Yes. And it's about everyone's life. And that's what I love about public transport. So, and I've been fortunate to navigate between, I'd say, within public transport, between two worlds, back and forth, government on one side. So what is it that as a community we want for services, and navigate between government and operators? So how can we make that better? How can we deliver those services? And I find this interface between government on the one side and operators absolutely it's thrilling for me, and I love navigating on the two sides. So I started on government side, then moved to the operators side with working with the SNCF. Then I had an opportunity to go back in government, shape some important reforms that we had a few years ago in France, and now I'm back on the operators side. And it may happen a few times more that I go on these two sides of the mirror, and that's the beauty of things. But I know that's something you've done, Paul, as well, actually.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say, we share that in common. When I started at Trapeze, I had worked for 30 years in the industry, exactly 15 in the private sector, exactly 15 in the public. So I agree with you. I enjoy both of them. Right now, I'm super enjoying in the private sector, though. Politics is pretty toxic here in the U.S. and right now. And so I'm enjoying helping people and like you, Julien, I kind of see working in the industry, and it sounds like you do too, as almost like a ministry. You're really helping people, and sometimes the people who need it the most.
I mean, that's our purpose, right? As an operator, we're part of the Keolis Group, and the motto of Keolis Group is think like a passenger, and that's really what we try to do. And how can we make their life, their journey, their experience better? And technology is here for that. Our amazing staff are here for that. Really dedicated at improving our passengers' life. That's what I love about public transport. It's improving people's life, and it's such an important part of everyone's life. If you think of the time, our passengers spend in the public transport, in their whole life, it's a huge amount of time. And this can be either some things that they are forced to do and they're unwillingly, and lots of disruptions or annoyances. This can be this. Or we can make it better. We can make it like an enjoyable experience, comfortable time for people, for themselves to relax, to unwind, to discuss with their peers. We can change their life, change their experience. That's what the beauty of public transport.
Yep, that's right. I always say we can make somebody's day, or we can really ruin their week.
Absolutely.
If we don't do it right. So that's interesting. So the model there in Australia is a lot of the public transport Victoria, so to speak. They contract out the operations to an operator, and that's what you're working for. You said Keolis Downer. I love those guys, by the way, at Keolis. I know Bernard and, of course, Clement Michel, who I've worked with a lot here in the U.S., and now is going back to headquarters in France. But you got a great team you work for. I love those the rooms you have in each of your offices that show all the KPIs on the wall, the key performance indicators. So before we go, you got to tell me about that, because I don't know that everybody knows about that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the beauty of being part of a group like Keolis Downer and a broader group like Keolis operating, in all continents now, 20 countries, and there is you just mentioned the visualization rooms, which is something now that we have in all our operations across the world, and it's a very simple thing. It's just we believe a lot in holding everyone in the organization accountable for our results. So this visualization rooms is we put all our KPIs on the wall for everyone to see where we stand at the moment. So it's for information sharing. It's also to remind what's at the core, what are the top priorities that we have. I must say that the fact that we have one in each our operations across the world with the same structure allows us to benchmark very easily. So it's not only we are not only running Yarra Trams in isolation in Australia. We are part of a broader network, which is like the Keolis group, and so it allows us to we're speaking the same language. We can compare. We spend a lot of time and energy just sharing best practices. Just now, for instance, just an example, we are working on a plan to improve our rolling stock availability at the moment in Melbourne.
To do what? I didn't catch that. Do what?
So we are working on a plan to improve the availability of our rolling stock at the moment in Melbourne.
Yes.
That's just an example, right? But being part of Keolis is I had immediately a network of 10 peers in other networks facing with the same issues. We have a great knowledge sharing online system where I can draw resources and immediately being part of that large network helps us to draw like best practices experiences or from other places of the world and implement those great ideas in Melbourne. That's really the strength of being part of Keolis here, and I hope and then deliver that and bring value to our clients, the state of Victoria and our customers here.
Another hat I wear here in the U.S. is I'm executive director of a group called the North American Transit Alliance, which is an industry association of North America's 6 largest transportation companies. And Keolis is one of those, TransDev, First Group, all these companies are part of that, National Express, RETP Dev, MV. And we just contracted with UITP to do a study on the value of contracting and to compare and contrast the models in Europe and Australia. And we looked at the Paris system, by the way, and then compare it to what's happening here in North America. And that's one of the things that came out really strong was the if you have an operator come in who is multinational, they have so much experience to draw on. There's really no novel situation that they can't draw from experience from someone else in to kind of help you through it.
That's the strength of the franchising model, where it's about creating a partnership between a local authority or public transport agency and an operator and an international network of operations. And by combining and creating this partnership between the two, you get the vision and of a government who knows best what's best in the jurisdiction and what the constituents and the passengers want. And you partner with an operator that is able to bring that and bring the best of experiences from other places in the world. I was just mentioning rolling stock maintenance. We're bringing practices from Manchester in the UK, for instance. When we think like a passenger, for instance, we're bringing practices, even things that we've seen in smaller cities, even in France, like Dijon, for instance. There are great things happening there.
Yeah, I've been to Dijon. I visited that transit system. Yeah.
It's a great transit system, a smaller one, but I mean, but they've been very innovative, and there are some innovations like in the way they run their operation center, for instance, that we can bring from there here. Those are just two examples, for instance, and by
it makes some good
partnering.
Mustard. No, I'm just kidding.
Absolutely, and that's and so maybe once we're done, with COVID, we can remove the sanitizer in the trams, and we can put mustard.
That's right. So tell us about the partnership you have there in Melbourne with PTV, and then tell us about your operation. Kind of give us. I think the statistics are amazing about how long your system is and all that kind of jazz. Go walk us through some of that stuff.
Well, Melbourne transit system is simply the greatest in the world. First, it's actually the largest in the world. Our tram system here, we have more than 250 kilometers of line, 500 trams operating on the network. Well, pre-COVID, we had more than 200 million passengers a year on the trams themselves.
And they're packed, I can tell you. I remember riding it. It was free in the downtown area, and it was just packed.
It is. Yeah. Well, it used to be, I'd say, pre-COVID.
Right.
Now it's a little bit different.
And a little bit of elbow room, huh?
Yeah. And so the trams in Melbourne are really iconic part of, the life of the city. I can share a small anecdote. I moved to Melbourne 2 years ago, so to become the CEO of Yarra Trams. And I have a strong memory of exactly the time when I landed in Australia. You get to the airport, and you enter the airport as just onboarding your plane, and one of the first things you see, is the souvenir shops, obviously. And I've been traveling a bit, and if you travel to New York City, you will see, this in the souvenir shops, you will see the Statue of Liberty. If you travel to Paris, you'll see the Eiffel Tower everywhere. What you see in the souvenir shops in the airport in Melbourne is trams, small trams.
Really?
And that's the first thing I saw, when landing in Australia was
that's awesome.
Trams. And that shows that, how strongly the trams are connected to the identity of Melbourne. They are really iconic here, and because Melbourne is a city that has actually never got rid of their tram system, unlike many other cities in the world. And Melbourne has always been proud and been maintaining this network. So that's the greatness of the trams in Melbourne. Everyone, it belongs to everyone here, really, in the city.
So, give us a little bit of the stats. You mentioned that you had 200 million prior to COVID. How many employees do you have? What's your budget?
We have absolutely. We have approximately 2,500 employees in the tram system, and that's the trams only. And 500 trams. Our annual turnaround is approximately $500 million US dollars.
Okay.
Here, and the big priority that we have at the moment. So we're operating under a franchise with the state of Victoria.
Right.
And the big priority in the contract now is to upgrade and overhaul our assets, because the beauty of our tram system is that it is iconic here. But it means that we have a lot of issues and the big challenge that we have is to transform this iconic system and iconic legacy system into something that is, cutting edge, which provide state of the art service to our passengers. So that's really the challenge we have in the contract with the state, and the state is really willing to make that transformation happen, and we're here to make that happen.
That's good. So what is your number one priority right now that you're working on?
Well, as I said, it's how can we transform this streetcar, I would say a legacy streetcar system,
yes, into
a modern light rail.
And how are you going to do it?
System. It's fascinating. It's first putting passengers at the center. And so what do they need now? And it means a few transformations. I can think of four big transformations that we have to deliver. The first transformation is we need to improve the overall performance and speed of our network. Our trams in Melbourne, and you've ridden on them, is, as you know, they are really running in the middle of in the streets, in the middle of the cars. 70% of our network is shared is with the cars. So it means that trams stop at intersection. They can get caught in congestion, and the average speed on our network is 16 kilometers per hour at the moment. And if you compare to benchmark cities in the world, modern tram system, light rail system, or new ones, average speed is more closer to 25 kilometers per hour. So then we have one big challenge here. How can we gradually improve things? So by improving separation on the road, by having modern, priority at intersections, all these things. When you build a system from scratch, you can have this priority separation like embedded from the start. We have to make that transition here. So using better technology, and that's the number one challenge that we have. The second challenge I just mentioned is our trams themselves. We have 500 of them, but 2/3 of them are already over 25 years old, and high floor, no air conditioning. And the government, the state of Victoria, has just launched a fantastic program to renew the fleet and bring new trams to the network. So this whole modernization of our fleet is really exciting. Will happen over the next 10 years.
Okay.
But that comes with a few challenges. The third priority and the first challenge that we have is accessibility. How can we have a more inclusive system? Because what was acceptable, I think 30, 40 years ago will no longer be acceptable in 20 years from now. So we have to make sure everyone can safely travel on the network. That's a huge challenge. We have 1,700 stops on the network in Melbourne, and only a small minority of them, actually 1/4 of them, are currently fully accessible.
Like the people in wheelchairs?
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's more than that. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be a young parent, for instance. If you want to take a public transport with a tram, for instance, or you just went shopping, for instance. Yeah. And so it's actually accessibility is not only about disabled people. That's true. It is about them, but it's about all of us at some point in our life. We need accessible public transport. Yes. So we need not only to think about the commuters, the people going to work in the morning. It's actually the commuters are already only a minority of our passengers. We need to think about all the others. What are all the situations? In what situations can you be at a certain point in your life? And that's a big transition. So it's accessibility, but more generally, it's inclusiveness of our network. That's good. That's beautiful. Our network. And what's the fourth thing? And the fourth thing I'd say is all the things with digital. How can digital and the new tools enhance the experience of our passengers? Passenger expectations are changing now. We need to provide them accurate real-time information. And people are making decisions on the spot, and we have to give them access to all this real-time information to make their travel as seamless as possible. That's great. I think those are great. Those are great projects for you to work on for a while, huh? Absolutely. That's enough to keep us busy for a few years. Yeah. So a few more questions before we go. Time is just gone. I wish we had an hour, actually, because this is really interesting. Tell us about the COVID situation. How did it affect you? Are you coming out of it, now that we're in the summer, those kind of things? I know it's winter for you, but summer for us over here. Yeah. Yeah, it's winter here, but no, we're still not out of it. And actually Melbourne was just finished our fourth lockdown here in Melbourne. So yes, obviously, public transport has taken a big hit here in Melbourne. During last year, we had 3 months of consecutive lockdown, and during 3 months, we've been operating basically with 10% of our usual number of passengers. Wow! So you told me how the trams were packed when you traveled here in Melbourne. Yeah. I can tell you that was a very weird experience to be sometimes the only passenger in tram. In peak hours. Wow. In Melbourne. We transform public trams into like private transport at some point.
Right.
You could have your own private tram, actually.
That's wild. You can say, I rented this whole thing for you. So when you bring your wife with you, right? I rented this whole tram for you. Look at this.
Exactly. And in the CBD, they are free.
All right, exactly.
But anyway, we're joking about this now, but because I think we're progressively going out of it, and we see
hopefully,
we see passengers returning, and that's really encouraging. Although it will take time for passengers to return, I think, because expectations with public transport have changed, and we have to regain the confidence of our passengers, and so that's the biggest challenge now. Is how can we create that confidence and bring our passengers back to the network? So it will take probably more than a few months to bring our passengers back. As I said, probably will take more passenger information. For instance, we know that our passengers now not only want to know when the tram is coming, but they will want to know how busy the trams are. For instance, to know if this is packed, we know people will be more reluctant, because there is now an expectation that you can maintain some social distance with fellow passengers, for instance. So we need to provide that information. And that's something we are working on with the government now. Another thing is, we know travel patterns are changing. People are now used to go 5 days a week to the office. And now they will probably go only 2-3 days a week in the office, and different hours, more flexible hours. So we need to adjust, our timetables, our service patterns, all these things that we now have to look at and do differently with COVID.
That's interesting. So what do you see happening over the next few months as you move forward into the fall for your transit system? What are you working on now for them?
So we're working with government. We're just launching the work on, for instance, new pricing products. For instance, because as I said, people will travel less, shorter distance. So, for instance, we used to have a very popular 5-day pass, weekly pass for people who were commuting 5 days a week. That was a very popular product. But I think the days of the weekly pass are gone, for instance.
That's right. It's got to be contextualized now.
Exactly. What do we replace it by? And we need to work with other operators in Melbourne, with the public transport agency, with everyone together to find a new product, for instance. That's one.
Okay.
Another one is, so how do we adjust our network and our timetables and the network design now that the behaviors are changing, for instance? There's a big question, what's the future of the CBD, for instance? The CBD in Melbourne is like a lot of office towers. It's really beautiful, but most of these office towers are empty at the moment. And what's the future of that? So we need to work with the city of Melbourne, with the big employers here, to understand what's the future of work, and then what's the future of public transport.
Yes, that's the question that a lot of cities are asking, right?
Absolutely.
It's really an inflection point for our industry. So
it's a defining moment. It's a defining moment.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit ago about digitization and the technology that you want to bring in there, and you're focused on improving the customer experience. What type of initiatives do you see that will move the needle and the performance, improving your performance overall, like you mentioned, this would increase the speed of it and the overall passenger experience? What are you hoping to bring in technology-wise? Because I think a lot of cities are looking at that.
I think the great thing is we get access to a huge amount of data at the moment. So I think the first priority is to understand what do our customers want at the moment. What are their expectations? For many years, we have had a steady growth of passenger numbers here in Melbourne, but behaviors were not really changing. It was just year on year. It was just 3% more of the same. Now, suddenly, everything is changing. The reasons why people are traveling are changing. The hours are changing. Where they are going are changing. What the expectation is changing. So it's a complete change of pace, where we have to understand and we have to understand that. And the great news is we have a tremendous amount of data that we can access almost in real time. And we're working with another subsidiary of Keel, which is Kizio, which is using, for instance, data from your cell phone or GPS data to understand in real time where people are traveling in real time. This will allow us to change our service patterns. This will allow us to put more trams where we see that we have more passengers, and almost in real time, because we cannot rely on surveys that we conducted 1 year ago.
Right.
That this data is already irrelevant, is obsolete. Right. We need to rely on surveys that we did like 1 week ago, and almost in real time be able to make these adjustments. And we know that the passengers will keep changing a lot over the next year, and we need to have the agility of to adapt to this. We know that public transport has not always been the most agile industry, but this is a great time for us to improve this and show that how responsive we can be in understanding the needs of our passengers and adapt to this.
That's great. Very good. Well, my last question would be, is there any other words of wisdom that you would give to our listeners all over the world who are in the throes of what you just discussed? So they're analyzing their transit systems, trying to figure out where do people want to go next, and pushing the reboot button to say, do I need to bring in new technology? Do I need to combine that with adjusting routes? Do I need to have a different type of service I'm even offering? Maybe micro transit, or maybe autonomous vehicles, or add in scooters, or give us some wisdom. You've been working this business for a long time. And you improved the on-time performance of the Paris system by 25%. You've got a solid background. Give us some words of wisdom for everybody that's listening, if you've got something.
That would be presumptuous to have of me, but I think it's time to really put the passengers at the center, understand what they want, and look and be really mode agnostic in the way we bring answers to our passengers. Yarra Trams, we are a tram operator, but we need to work, and we started working with the trains, with the buses, with microtransit, because the solution will be we need to find something that is fit for purpose, and this will have to be multimodal. We will have to work everyone in conjunction. So this is where it's really time to think, across borders and think in a very different way, because, as we said, this is a redefining moment for the public transport industry. And we could either, I wouldn't say disappear, but we could either become irrelevant,
right,
or we could adapt and actually be part of that movement to reshape the cities. And there are great things happening everywhere around the world with the 15-minute city, all these things. So this is time for us to think differently.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's that integrated network that you talked about that really probably is the solution, right? Instead of running everything kind of like siloed, it's to now cross over, have the technology that can talk to each other, right? That's been a big key in the past, I think. When I was in Baltimore, man, I had a disintegrated transit system, right? I ran a light rail system, a bus system, a subway system, and they didn't communicate. They had separate uplines for management. They didn't interact with each other. And so integrating them probably is the key. I think you nailed it, Julien.
The passengers do not care about trams or trains or bus. They just want a solution, the best solution for them to go where they need to go. And we as an industry have to provide that.
Very good. Julien Dehornoy, CEO of Yarra Tram, giving advice for everyone in the industry, which I think everyone is agreeing with. We're all coming down on the conclusion that in order to have an improved network that really needs to focus on the customer, number one, right? That's the number one KPI, is improving customer experience. And then if you build it, then they will come, right? They'll come back to the vehicles, come back to our system. They feel safe. We provide an efficient system, reliable, with world-class customer service. And we might even find ourselves with 20% new passengers in a year, people that didn't use it before, because now it's clean, it's trustworthy. They can look at the palm of their hand and see where the vehicle is at all times. This could be phenomenal, Julien.
I can't wait to see that. But we have to define this. We can do it.
That's right. We're going to make it happen. Well, I'm really happy that you're there in one of the greatest cities in the world, helping to lead that, make that happen, Julien.
Well, thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thank you so much for being our guest on Transit Unplugged. And to all our folks around the world, I encourage you, if you ever do get to Australia, to make sure you visit Melbourne and ride their iconic light rail system, their tram system. It is phenomenal and run by one of the greatest leaders in the industry. Thank you so much for being with us, Julien.
It was a pleasure, Paul.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Transit Unplugged in Depth with our guest Julien Dehornoy of Yarra Trams. Next week on Transit Unplugged News and Views, we travel to Illinois to the Champaign Urbana Mass Transit District and learn about their new hydrogen generation and refueling center. If you have questions, comments, feedback, or even want to be a guest on the show, you can email us at info@transitunplugged.com. So until next week, hope everyone rides safe and rides happy.